Sentire Media.
This episode is brought to you by the Smart Move Italy app, your free tool for planning, moving, and thriving in Italy. Download it today on iOS and Android. Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy. I'm Samantha Wilson, and today we are talking about something that surprises almost everyone who either visits or moves to Italy. You see, you arrive here, you eat pasta, you eat bread, you eat pizza, maybe a little too much cheese and a little too much wine, and somehow you feel better, not worse. People say it to me all the time. I don't understand it. I ate pasta every day. I felt amazing. The bread didn't bother my stomach. Or I had pizza 3 nights in a row and I didn't feel bloated at all. Now, if that sounds like you, and if you've ever spent time in Italy, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So today we're diving into that question. Is it the food? Is it the ingredients? Or is it the lifestyle? Or is it something deeper about the way people live and eat here in Italy? Now, to help us unpack this, I have a special guest today, a doctor and a nutritional specialist who recently came to Italy to explore why people here seem to eat foods many people fear, and yet still maintain better gut health and longevity. So today we're going to talk about the Italian lifestyle, the Mediterranean way of eating, and why slowing down might actually be the secret ingredient. Are you ready? Let's get started. I'm Samantha Wilson, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show for people who love Italy and are quietly trying to figure out what it would really take to build a life here. We talk honestly about the practical choices, the emotional shifts, and the parts of this journey that don't always get talked about, so that you can move forward feeling informed, grounded, and more confident. If you're somewhere between dreaming and doing, you are in exactly the right place. Now, let's get into today's show. Okay, so why do so many people either lose weight when they come to Italy, even when they feel like they do nothing but eat? And why, after living here for years, is it so hard to go back to eating in your home country? Although I rarely go back to Canada now, since, of course, all of my kids and grandkids are over on this side of the pond, and, of course, my friends and my mom prefer to come here to visit, I can say that every time that I would go back, it would take just a few days before I started to feel physically different, and not in a good way, my friends. And what I used to attribute to the preservatives in the food, which that, of course, is still true, I've come to realize that the secret to feeling better and healthier in Italy isn't just the food. It's the entire lifestyle around the food. You see, in many parts of the world, meals are something that we squeeze into our day. We grab something quickly. We eat in the car. We eat at our desks or while we're answering emails or even scrolling on our phones. But in Italy, meals are still treated as a moment. People sit down. They take their time. They talk. They eat slowly and in smaller portions over longer periods of time. And this actually matters a lot more than people realize, because digestion doesn't just depend on what we eat. It depends on the state that your body is in while you're eating. And Italians have this down packed. Now, if you're stressed, rushing, and distracted, your body is in a stress response. So blood flow moves away from the digestive system, which makes it harder for your body to properly break down and absorb the food that you're eating. But when you slow down and relax during meals, digestion works the way it's supposed to. And this is where the Italian lifestyle really makes a difference. There's more walking, more time outside, more social connection, much less snacking. Meals are shared, they're not rushed. And that alone changes the digestive environment in your body. Then, of course, there's the quality of the food itself. Now, one of the biggest things that people notice when they come to Italy is that foods like bread and pasta feel completely different. And part of that comes down to how the food is grown and processed, because many modern food systems rely on chemicals and preservatives and large-scale processing that prioritize speed and convenience and, of course, price. But in most of Italy, food is still grown closer to home, eaten seasonally, and prepared with very simple ingredients. So even something like pasta or bread can have a completely different effect on your body. Now, another big difference is portion size, and there is a myth that Italians eat these massive meals. They don't. What they actually do is eat multiple small courses very slowly over time. The meal lasts longer, but the portions themselves are smaller. And because the ingredients are real and nutrient dense, you don't need the same amount of food to feel satisfied. Now, when you combine better ingredients and slower eating and the lifestyle that naturally includes more movement and less stress, well, the result is something that people notice almost immediately when they come here. They feel better. To help us unpack what might actually be happening, I'm joined by Dr. Anna Toker. She is a board-certified colorectal surgeon with nearly 30 years of experience helping patients with digestive health. But recently, she went a little bit further. She traveled to Italy. She came here to study why people seem to live longer, eat well, and still maintain better gut health. Dr. Toker, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Before we dive in here, you spent nearly 3 decades as a colorectal surgeon. What made you start looking beyond surgery and focusing on nutrition and, most importantly, gut health?
Well, what I've noticed in the course of the last 20 years in particular, that my patients seem to be getting sort of sicker and heavier as the years have gone on. And of course, as an observer of humanity, this was abnormal. New diseases such as fatty liver disease and metabolic syndrome, these are all kind of new concepts. The number of people who came into my office really was significant. Digestive challenges would get these workups worth $40,000-$50,000 of x-rays and tests and repeated and procedures, and none of that seemed to improve things. And oftentimes they were coming to me because they thought, well, maybe I just needed an operation somewhere, and they would just stumble into my office looking for a surgery.
Right.
Now, these people don't have a surgical problem. They have an environmental problem. And the question was, why? And so I just kind of took it upon myself probably 15 or 16 years ago to start making associations between what people are eating, what their lifestyles were, what they were and were not drinking, and comparing that to perhaps lifestyles from 50, 60 years earlier when we didn't
Mm-hmm.
seem to have these challenges as a society,
Right.
and just kind of came to the conclusion that it is a combination of sort of chronic stress, chronic dehydration, and then chemicals in our environment. And when you put all of those things together and you degrade the food supply, you wind up with just a burgeoning um, problem in
Mm-hmm.
the digestive world. And so it's coincidence, it's my observation of humanity. These people come to me for surgery. I'd love to operate on you, but you don't have a surgical problem. But I'm not
Right.
the kind of person who could let someone leave the office without some form of advice. None of the other doctors will give them advice. That's the other kind of other edge of the sword, is that as insurance companies and hospitals have taken over the healthcare system, and the physician themselves are really no longer in charge, we're given a docket of patients that we have to get through in the course of the day, and it just is not enough time to have this conversation with people.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's one of the reasons I started doing videos and posting things online, thinking, look, maybe this will spare some of my office time dealing with, I want to see people who
Right.
need surgery, and I don't need to be seeing people who don't need surgery. So if I post this online, maybe that'll spare my office. That really hasn't. It's made more
Yeah.
people who don't need surgery come to me, which is kind of the opposite effect. I do not want that. I just I want to help people, you know.
Yeah, well, what you're saying really is alluding to the fact that this problem, maybe a more, modern day problem,
Yeah.
is fixable. I mean, if there's advice that you can give to help people that don't need surgery, it implies to me that maybe there's something that they can do to help themselves outside of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of self-help involved. Now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, with the American demeanor, people don't want
Mhm.
self-help. They wanna take a pill, they wanna have an operation, they want the quick answer. It is actually quite difficult to improve your problem on your own when you're talking
Yeah.
about environmental toxins. There's a lot of homework that has to be done, and you're removing a lot of the modern conveniences of life when you
Mhm.
try to clean up your act. And so it is actually quite difficult to self-help, but yes, it's self-help, and there's really honestly, there's no other answer for the problem.
Yeah, yeah, and I can tell you because I'm from Canada, but, we have the same problems with preservatives and fast food and inconvenience and, stress and all of those things compared to Italy anyway, and I've been here
Yeah.
many, over decades, so I can tell you when I go back, to North America, it is
Mhm.
almost within 3 days, I have digestive problems. Really, it's that fast for me.
Yeah.
And we eat really well and, we don't really think about the stuff that we eat here because it's just a different lifestyle. And I think that it's not just the kind of food that we're eating with, no preservatives and fresh and healthy and local and all of those things, but it's also the lifestyle that we lead in Italy, which is a combination, which is specifically what I wanted to talk to you about
Yeah.
because as I said earlier when we just started before we actually hit the record, I had confessed that I had found your Instagram channel and I saw you did a series on when you came to Italy
Yes.
and what you learned about why it is that people here live so long or feel so much better because the behavior is remarkably different. So I'd
Yes.
love to talk about that.
Yeah, there's a distinct cultural difference. My mother is German, and so I was raised in a home that was sort of half European and half American. So I
Mm.
feel like that made me immune to some of these challenges. Some people don't have that external influence. The European culture is one regardless, and of course, Italy has been around for thousands of years. The average American can't wrap their mind around a tradition that might be several thousand years old.
Mhm.
But a lot of the Italian mindset will fall into that old-fashioned Mediterranean
Mhm.
concept,
Mhm.
ranging from, um, walking everywhere and a culture that values time spent around the table in a social environment consuming their food. We don't do this in America. We are kinda, I don't wanna say slaves to the corporate world. It our lifestyle is nice. I live in a big home. I have a lot of modern conveniences, but I have to work very hard for that. And
Mhm.
there is something to maybe a smaller home in a small town where everyone knows you and the store is open when the store is open and everyone accepts that without a lot of social pressure because everyone else is also taking a lunch break, eating
Mhm.
breakfast. It's like it's more of a it's a there's a culture behind a slower way of life that
Mhm.
exists really throughout the Mediterranean. And some of that is quite helpful to us in terms of digestion because it takes some of the stress out of our lives. So, elevated chronic stress is a disaster for the digestive process because of
Mhm.
hormones and stress and lack of blood flow to the GI tract when we're under stress. So we're living in a world of chronic intestinal ischemia, which is nothing but belly cramping and belly pain, and you can't digest in that environment. And so something simple like taking longer to chew and longer to sit down and eat and
Mhm.
smaller portions that you eat over a longer period of time and throwing in a digestive bitter like Aperol before you get started, and then finishing that up with a glass of red wine, which has resveratrol in it, which increases blood flow and making sure you're drinking your fluids. And all those things, when you take that time,
Mhm.
vastly improves digestive health. And we haven't really even talked about the quality of the food yet. We're just simply talking about the nature of how the ebb and flow of life in Europe is,
Yeah.
and even in the medical world, the physicians there have a different pace to them The physician's lounge has a different pace to it.
Mhm.
And it is just a different cultural acceptance. In
Yeah.
my office, if I took a break to eat lunch, the world would practically come to an end.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
are you? You've got a case done. Every minute of my day is taken in the care of a patient. So I have no care for myself. So it's a very, very different world.
It is
Yeah.
different, and this is what the challenge is I remember when I used to just come to Italy before I actually moved here,
Mhm.
and I know people experience this because it changes you. You transform when you're here, and it doesn't take very long.
Yeah.
And when I would go back to North America, I would say, "Okay, that's it. We are going to eat better. We're going to walk more. We're going to do
Yeah.
sleep better and take our time."
Yeah.
And it works for the first few days, maybe a few weeks, but the pressures and just the lifestyle just seeps in, and it feels almost impossible to
It's
keep up because of the pressure.
yes, I think, and especially if you're someone who works a routine job. So like a retiree probably has a lot more ability to
Mhm.
control themselves. My daughter who traveled with me on that particular trip, she works for Sony Publishing House, and unfortunately for her, it's a hybrid job where half of it's at home and half of it's at work. And so the
Mhm.
times that she's working at home,
Mhm.
as long as she gets her work done, they don't really care that you took a nice slow lunch hour,
Yeah. Yeah.
or that you had to stop for 2 seconds and just go out on the patio and watch the birds for a moment and decompress. And so for her, it's a little bit easier because of the job. And I think an average American is not that fortunate. They're like
Mhm.
me. I mean, I wake up at 5 in the morning, I get home at 6 o'clock at night, and I l dedicate all of that time towards something other than myself or my
Yeah.
self-care, it's a
Yeah.
constant
Because there's
go.
not enough time. Yeah, exactly.
There's yeah, there's just not enough time. And again, it's a cultural thing.
Yeah. So tell me when you came here, what
Mhm,
was the first thing that made you think, and I know you say you come from European background, so you always kind of had it, but when you came to Italy, what
mhm.
was the first thing that made you think, "Oh, wow, this is really different?"
I think it's the time spent with a meal is what
Mm,
is so different.
yeah.
Um, Americans put so much emphasis on this huge breakfast that you cram down the hatch in 2 seconds,
Yeah.
and then a huge lunch, which is
Mhm.
all seed oils and fast food that you cram down the hatch in 2 seconds, and
Mhm.
then dinner, you're exhausted, so you go out to dinner, and God only knows what they're putting in the food. Now, what I
Yeah.
recognized in Italy is that there's not a lot of big breakfasts going on there. The European
No.
Americans kinda make fun of the European continental breakfast. It's like a
Yeah.
bun,
Yeah,
and,
sweet.
a cup
Yeah.
of coffee.
You know, yeah, when
So
I was a kid, I used to love chocolate cake for
yeah,
breakfast. My mom
yeah,
was great. She had the greatest mom in the world. She let me eat it. She didn't care. And when I moved to Italy, I'm like, this is awesome. I get cake for breakfast.
yes.
We have,
Oh my gosh,
sweets, but not a lot. Yeah.
yeah. But it's a small portion,
Yeah. Portions,
and
portions,
and
portions.
and so, yeah, it's a portion, and you had a little bit more time to drink it. I mean, even, like, we were in the subway. We were in Milan, which,
Mhm.
this is before the Olympics, but we were in Milan, and then, of course, we took the train out to Lake Como and Bellagio like every American tourist would, and to Cinque
Mhm.
Terre, and it was lovely. And
Mhm.
so we spent some time in the train stations and the subways, and even the little kiosk at the subway that in theory should be fast food
Mhm.
had a proper cup of coffee in, like, a real
Oh,
coffee
Jet,
cup
of
with real
course.
milk going
Yeah.
in it. And
Yeah.
then, they had the displayed the sandwich case, like
Mhm.
real sandwiches, not slop. So it was like they put a priority, in my opinion, on the importance of not just the molecular structure of your lunch, proteins, carbs, and fats. Americans like to get so
Mhm.
specific in the gotta have my protein man, my aminos, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
That I didn't hear someone mention that at all in
No.
Europe. It was just sort of an accepted that, yeah, you're gonna have some protein, and yes, there's fat on
Well,
it. And it's like no one
yeah.
ever talks about those kind of breakdowns. and
No.
it didn't matter. Everyone was fit as a fiddle.
Yeah.
So
And I
it's a
also want to talk about just for a second here about the portion size, because I know that this is actually it's a myth. And a lot of Italians, and I see lots of these Instagrams of American Italians, and they have the big dinners because it's this
yeah,
idea that
yeah,
Italians have these big tables full of just copious amounts of food. And that's how they're doing it there. But in Italy, that's
right.
not how Italians
No,
eat. Now, they eat for a very long time, but they don't, and they may consume a lot of different courses, but every
yeah,
course is not giant. It's
correct.
actually more surprisingly smaller than you probably would imagine.
Yeah,
But it's this pacing and this timing of the
exactly.
food. And I'll tell you too that it starts very young here. I mean, it because it's so ingrained in the families, it actually translates even into the school system. There are in the smaller towns in Italy, the local butcher and the baker and everything, they bring the food to school
I
for
love
the
that.
kids. They're eating this, I know, this incredible food not fast food. I mean, balanced
Yeah,
and healthy and fresh, and only what's obviously local and in season, because that's very important here because we don't gas
yes,
our things here to eat them
right.
all year long.
Yep.
So, can we talk about the food a little bit and
Sure,
what
of
you
course.
learned, or
Yeah.
maybe you can, yeah, maybe as a nutritionist, of course, and a specialist, maybe you can help us understand
Okay.
really what it is that for one thing, people, let's just start with pizza and bread and dairy and things like that, because people think these are all horrible things to eat. But in Italy, you can eat just gobs of cheese and pasta and bread and you don't feel the same. So, can you explain why that might be? What's the difference?
Yeah, so it is interesting. When I started this deep dive, probably about 18 years ago, I started to recognize that 80% of patients who have IBS symptoms in America, if you put them on a gluten-free diet, their symptoms go away. Now, there's a lot of study on this topic. What is it about gluten that causes this problem? And it is an inflammatory molecule, but almost every plant-based food has some form of inflammatory molecule in it. It's God's way of protecting that plant from being eaten by animals. Because if you ate too much of it, it would upset the stomach. That animal would either recognize not to eat it again, or we get a little bit of an upset stomach, and the seeds that it didn't chew completely, that animal would kind of poop out. This is a natural, what we call an anti-nutrient or a
Mhm.
lectin, and so there are some doctors in America that are causing food fear amongst patients, and these lectins, the lectins are
Mm,
not artificial. They're God put that in the food. So gluten does have a lectin in it,
mhm.
and certain people are born with an inability to tolerate it. That's the disease of celiac disease, but that's a very rare disease. Probably
Right.
1 in 50,000 people are born with
Certainly not the
celiac
amount of
disease.
people, yeah, not the amount of people
No,
who think they're
no.
gluten
So then
intolerant. Yeah.
exactly. So then where did this gluten intolerance come from? And I will tell you, there's a lot of patients who are like, it can't be the gluten because I have eaten the same brand of bread for 50 years. I'm like, well, see, because that's because your bread company is using a different sourced wheat, a different process. Everyone's trying to speed up the process from farm to factory. And in
Mhm.
doing so, they're adding chemicals to prep the soil before they grow the plants. They grow the plants, they cut them down, they spray those plants to dry them to speed up the drying process. They bring it to a manufacturer, and in the process of grinding, they don't really separate the wheat from the chaff. It all happens in a machine, which means
Right.
whatever chemicals have been sprayed on the crop to dry it winds up getting contaminated into the part that you're supposed to be eating. And this is the explanation why glyphosate is the molecule I'm talking about. It's the most notorious, but there's others. But
Mhm.
even organically grown crops and organically used food, when tested, can have high amounts of glyphosate in them. And of
Mhm.
course, the farmers are like, "It's not us, we're not putting on there," and I never said that it was you. But somewhere in the processing, They're
Right.
saying some parts of America, it's the glyphosate is so thick that it falls out of the clouds because it gets
Oh my goodness.
evaporated into the sky and then rains back down on the ground, and that's not the farmer's fault, and it isn't. But it's a combination of an inflammatory molecule like glyphosate, which causes extreme inflammation in the GI tract, and then you add a little bit of a lectin to it.
Hmm.
Now we're off to the races.
Right.
And
Right.
this is part of what prompts the desire to go on a carnivore diet. There's a lot of people in America going pure carnivore. You can't
Yeah.
go pure carnivore. They're
Yeah.
taking supplements because you're not meant to be pure carnivore. I mean, the diet that clearly has the most longevity is going to be a Mediterranean diet. The
Hmm.
people of Sardinia, on average, lived in their 90s.
Yeah.
You're talking about a Mediterranean diet that is a mixture of seafood and yes, red meat and lots of fruits and veggies in their season, but it's all kind of in their season, and that is the difference.
Yes. It is, and I'll tell you, I have a house in Sardinia, so I'm there a lot.
Mm.
And these, 800-year-old people, I always say,
Yes,
because they're really old,
seriously.
but they're walking. I mean, they're not just old people sitting in a chair. These are vibrant,
Yeah,
people. And I'm telling you, they are eating plates of pasta. They're eating
yeah,
it depends in Sardinia. Around the sea, of course, we have seafood, but there's a lot of meat eaten in Sardinia and it's very rustic. So
yeah,
lots of fatty meats and
yeah.
lots of cheese. Pecorino is
Yes,
Sardinian. And so
yes, I love it.
tons and tons of cheese, and they're living forever and they're healthy and and they're drinking wine and they're
Yeah,
eating oil. So all
yeah,
of these things in North America is just,
yeah,
we're told those are really bad things to eat. I mean, a big block of cheese, you would never do that. But it's the
yeah,
kind of cheese, isn't it?
correct. Yeah, so yeah, yes, it's what I find fascinating. There's nothing more depressing than huffing it up the side of a little mountain
Uh,
and getting smoked by a
getting lapped by
90-year-old
an old
dude
person.
who's got a yeah, he's got a cigarette dangling from his mouth, and he's carrying a bottle of wine, and you can tell he's drunk. I'm like, "What?" And he is walking 3 times faster than me, and I'm dying. And
Yeah,
so, okay, so what is it? I would say, and my advice to patients has always been that if you will turn back the hands of time, because Americans used to be that healthy, if you will
yeah,
turn back the hands of time and eat like it's 1926 and not 2026, I think you will regain your health. Because the issue is there was no such thing as artificial butter. There was no such thing as a quote unquote vegetable oil. That didn't exist. I mean, olive oil, yes, but
yeah.
vegetable oil in America only sounds healthy. It was originally designed to be an industrial lubricant. It's like, they're using Crisco instead of tallow or lard. It's just successful marketing campaigns.
Mm, mhm,
It's 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 expensive to grow an animal, butcher it, take the fat, render it. Like, what is the profit margin on that? It's not
yeah,
much. And
yeah,
in the corporate world, they live on profit margin.
yeah,
So how do you get people to comply? Because certainly does not taste as good as tallow or lard when you cook. I mean, bacon grease, holy cow, that's the best thing ever.
yeah, yeah.
So how did they do it? Basically, they convinced you that it was healthier, that animal fat had quote unquote cholesterol, and cholesterol is associated with certain physical findings that sound unhealthy.
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
so and the average American bought it. Look, those people in Sardinia don't belong to the big fitness clubs,
No.
they aren't doing YouTube videos and with the kettlebells and stuff like that. They're literally just living their lives.
Yeah.
And they live it well and enjoyably and admittedly at a different pace, and maybe they don't get internet everywhere, and is that really? Because 20 years ago, I didn't get anywhere internet anywhere, like, why does
Mhm.
that matter? So
Yeah,
so I think part of it is we are susceptible to, I dare I say, indoctrination
yeah,
for a
yeah.
for a corporate purpose, and I believe So one of my missions was before I retire, before I pass on beyond this life, I feel like it is a divine act of mercy to explain to people, not that you've been duped, but that you are kind of a victim of commercialism,
Hmm.
that God put you on this planet long before any of these factories or long before oil was extracted out of the ground, before there was a processing machine or electricity, and yet humanity lived for thousands and thousands of years quite well. I mean, my goodness, look at what the Romans accomplished in Italy alone. Everywhere you turn around, you're staring at a building that's 3,000 years old, still
Yeah.
standing, still
Yeah.
standing.
Yeah.
You can't get a modern building to stand like that. So obviously they did something correct, which means we can learn from that. Did they have disease? Yes. I'm not saying go back 2,000 years and forget your antibiotics, but I am saying that lifestyle, I believe, could return, if we could just sort of start with putting on a label what the glyphosate level is. Like,
Yeah.
maybe glyphosate free, because it's the combination of wheat and the chemicals that causes the problem. In Europe, the wheat does not contain any less gluten than the
Hmm.
wheat does in America. It's
Hmm.
pretty much the same amount of gluten. The difference is the presence of the glyphosate,
Hmm.
and there's a little bit of a genetic difference between the types of gluten, but it's pretty minor.
Right.
This explosion of us getting sick in America is a new phenomenon, about 30 years old. And
Yeah.
it correlates directly to artificial sweeteners, artificial colors, glyphosate used in farming, modern processing, the focus on vegetable oils, seed oils, and this concept of animal food, animal meat, animal fat is bad for you, when it's quite the contrary. It's quite good
Yeah.
for you.
So cheap and easy always wins because it does come down to that. But
Yeah.
how do we fix it then? So, we're lucky because I'm lucky because I live in Europe and we don't have a choice here. Let's put it this way. It feels the same way what you're talking to me. Here in Italy, we don't have a choice but to eat the way we do, which luckily results in this healthier lifestyle and longevity. But I think I feel the same in the US, even in Canada, and in the UK, actually. It's the same way.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't have a choice but to eat. It feels like you don't have a choice but to live and eat the way that you're being fed. Or
Yeah.
is there a way? I mean, so what can we tell people? How can we,
There
help them
there
out
is.
when they're home?
Because again, this problem is new. It's a 30-year-old problem. What were we doing differently 30 years ago was not just, um, there's no glyphosate. There probably was, to a degree. There was a lot more make dinner at home.
Hmm.
I mean, there are Americans who go out to dinner every night. I can't even imagine that. How expensive must that be? But
Hmm.
um,
Convenience, convenient. Yeah.
it is an act of convenience,
Hmm.
and we want, because quote unquote there's no time, but if you look on your phone where it keeps track of how much time you spent staring at your phone, you'll see it's somewhere between 4 and 6 hours a day. That's plenty of time to cook your own meals, you know?
It's
And so, like, I tell my patients and the people who watch me on the social media, try to use food kit companies. Like, if you want high quality food and you don't know how to cook, we've lost a lot of teaching of cooking to
mm,
people. Like, no one knows how to cook anymore. And so they have these meal kit companies. Some of them specialize in organic only foods,
mhm,
and they come with a recipe and instructions. Some of these companies, the kits are so simple because the food is like pre-sous vide cooked in a
mhm,
vacuum sealed package, but it's organic with no seed oils, which is half the battle. So I would start there, because then you can learn, and then you get to keep the recipe. And then as
right.
time goes on, maybe you don't need the kit company. It's convenient because they mail it to you. You don't have to walk into a grocery store and get overwhelmed by reading labels. You can read labels at home from the comfort of your home while you're shopping on these meal kit companies, and it comes with a little recipe, everything that you could possibly need. You don't have leftover stuff that you'll never use again. If you don't like that meal, that weird spice it took, you didn't have to spend $20 on a bottle of spice you'll never use again.
Mm-hmm.
So it is nice, it's convenient, it's educational. And my family and I started doing that maybe 12 or 14 years ago, to the point where both of my children cook their own meals, and that's very unusual for their age group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They enjoy it. They enjoy cooking. They know my daughter's stomach is very touchy, and they know they feel better when they do it,
Yeah.
and they can tell when they go out to dinner that they don't feel right. It just makes them feel poorly, and so they have already made that association, and it was simply because I just kind of went through that process with them about 12 years ago. So I do
Yeah.
suggest people do that.
And I think it's just take the time to try to
Yeah.
anybody who's traveled and has gone to another country, come over to Europe, whether it's Italy or another Mediterranean country.
Mm.
Not the UK. UK is exactly the same, but
Yes,
over
yes,
over here on this side,
yes.
just try to remember the feeling that you had when you were here. And it's awfully nice to be able to eat a nice pizza or have a big plate of pasta and
Yes.
not feel
And to sit,
horrible
yeah,
for 3 days. But you have
exactly.
to search for it. Unfortunately, it's just not easy, right?
Yes.
It's effort.
Yes. I mean, that's the beauty of the internet. You can now have things shipped to you. Amazon does a good job of doing that. There are some things you can only, like, they won't ship out of the EU because of tariffs or whatever, but you can get around that. There's some, like Italy is a company in America that ships all over America. Dallas is lucky we have an Italy here, so you can walk in. It
Mhm,
means all of the flour is Italian, all the pasta is Italian,
mhm.
and the pastries that they make in house and whatnot, they make in a traditional style with no processed food, and it's
Yeah.
all
Be-
Italian originating. So
Because it's a real thing. It's not just
yeah,
a myth or a marketing ploy to say that
no,
Italy has
sure,
the best food. It truly
yeah,
truly these things that we're talking about exist, and even in from a, I mean, I'm not a scientist,
yeah.
but from a scientific level, all the way through to just
No,
proven
it does.
longevity of
Yes.
people, there has to
The
be something.
the average American, I don't think, recognizes that. Europeans are lucky because there are more farms closer to the urban areas, so they
Hmm.
can get local food a little bit easier, I believe. I do
Yeah,
suggest Americans search out their local farmers and farm markets because that can be quite helpful, provided that you find an organic one that doesn't use the glyphosates, right?
yeah,
A lot of Americans also don't recognize that there are some places in Italy, like the vineyards and whatnot, that have been there for thousands of years. Like they don't use any chemicals. They don't
yeah.
even water the crops. The way they settle them in a valley, the way they surround them by olive trees, and then the pine cypress type trees, all of that is done on purpose to keep insects away, so that you don't need pesticides, and then to
Hmm.
to, to collect water in the area, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that type of farming is very slow, and
Yes.
therefore it's going to be more expensive. And here's the
Mhm.
thing, from a nutritional value standpoint, you don't need the volume of food when it's high quality food. So the
Right.
average American feels quote unquote hungry all the time, not just because of additives to foods, but the food we're consuming is missing a lot of micronutrients. That's one of the things glyphosate does, is it removes salts out of your food. So a lot of your hungry is really just electrolyte hydration, that you're missing, and they don't have that problem in Italy. The nutritional value per tomato, for example,
Yeah.
you just don't need the volume of food when it's real food, when it's
Hmm.
not been given hormones, when it's just been
Yeah.
living on the hoof out in the field. There's more compact energy there. You don't have to consume the volume. And when you don't have to consume calories that have no nutrition in them, all of a sudden half of your weight problem will disappear, and almost
Yeah.
all of your gut problems will disappear. I mean, that's just sort of, it's the same answer.
Yeah, I was going to end this with asking you, what is the single most important thing that people misunderstand about their gut health? And I think you maybe just answered that.
Yeah, it's inflammatory. So your problem
Yeah.
is all medical, Hippocrates said this, speaking of Mediterranean dudes, I know he's Greek, but 2,500 years ago said basically that all disease begins in the gut and that no manner of brains was worth a good set of bowels. He understood that if you do something to your gut to cause inflammation, you are going to wind up creating in yourself a chronic medical illness, beginning with obesity and high blood pressure and diabetes, but that goes to cancer and autoimmune diseases as well. That all starts with gut inflammation as the preceding factor. And of course, there's been a lot of studies from the Gluten Foundation at Harvard in Boston that inflammation seems to start from gluten, which is sort of how gluten gets to be the bad guy here. But the only reason gluten causes that level of inflammation is because it's packaged with other chemicals in an already dehydrated and stressed person. So it's the combination of things. So I would say slow down your life, chew your food better, dedicate more time to a meal for yourself, walk as much as possible, take the stairs instead of an elevator or an escalator if you possibly can.
Mhm.
And just sort of try to mitigate as much stress as you can in your life. There is something relaxing to sitting on a patio watching the sunset.
Mhm.
And that is kind of the Italian mindset.
Yeah.
And I do recognize that their social construct is very different as far as the go, go, go type
Yeah.
mentality. But slow it down. You will be for the better, spend more time with the children. Your kids will be the better for it. Cook together as a family. That's probably the best thing that I ever did with my children. It helped us develop a relationship. They weren't the zombies staring at TV. They do zombie
Mm.
at the TV. Yes, they do. But when it's time to cook and they're both in college and out of college, they come home and that's the first thing they want to do. They want to cook a meal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's again, that's what we did a decade ago, and everyone can start that process now. You don't have to give all of your life to a corporate entity, both because you purchase their food and because you work for them. You can slow down for a moment. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And
Give
put
yourself
put
permission. I always
yeah, give
say,
yourself
yeah.
permission. Yeah, the single
Yeah.
most important thing that we have are our family, and believe me, God didn't put you on this earth to need margarine or prescription medications. Like, you don't need those things.
Oh, this is true. Dr. Toker, thank you so much. Really, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for joining us. Now, listen, I am going to put all of your Instagram links and where people can find you and learn more about you on our show notes so they can contact you after. Thank you so much for this show. I've really enjoyed it.
That sounds great. I really appreciate it. Thank you for asking.
So maybe the lesson here isn't that you need to move to Italy in order to feel healthier, but there is something that we can learn from the Italian approach to food and life itself. And basically, it's slow down, even if it's just a little bit. Take time for your meals, cook real food when you can, eat with people that you enjoy, walk more, and maybe most importantly, give yourself permission to enjoy food again. Because here in Italy, food isn't the enemy. It's part of the joy of living, and sometimes that joy might just be the healthiest ingredient of all. All right, my friends, time for the questions. Question number 1. What is the thing that surprised you the most the first time you visited Italy? Wow, okay. What surprised me the most? Well, this was a long time ago. This is like over 30 years ago. I think what surprised me the most, there were so many things that impacted me, but I think it really was the people. I think I was so surprised at how connected they were to not just each other and their communities, because I wasn't here long enough to really understand that. I could see something was happening, but didn't quite know what the problem was, or not the problem, but what was going on. But I think it was the way that they responded to me and to my mom, because that's who I came here the first time with. And it was this just undeniable hospitality, this honest welcoming to their world and the pride that the Italians have of their culture and their food and their lifestyle and their country, really, in general. They're very, very proud of that. And I still see it, obviously, it hasn't changed. So I think the thing that surprised me the most that I didn't expect, I wasn't just a person passing through, although I didn't really feel that way. I felt very, very welcomed and very connected, and I still do to this day. Question number 2. Is it better to rent or buy a home when you first move to Italy? Well, this is a $1 million question, sometimes more, sometimes less, and a lot of people consider this. And it really depends on a couple of things. Number 1, your budget or your intended commitment to Italy. And number 2, whether or not you really know where you want to live. Now, the nice thing about renting is that it is easier to change locations if you decide that your initial place wasn't the best place or your perfect place. And remember, a lot of people rent first because they need a place for their visa. So instead of waiting for the perfect place, they get a rental that might not be their ideal location, and then with the intention of moving later. So renting is always a really good first option. However, if you already know exactly where you want to live because you've been coming here over and over for years, you might already have a community, you know exactly where you want to be, then you have a lot more options if you decide to buy. And buying in Italy is a commitment, not just financially, but it's not as easy to flip a property in Italy. So when you buy, it's a long game. It's a long investment. You will, if you decide you want to move or sell your house, you will have to accept the fact that it could take a while before it will sell. So I think buying or renting, it really depends on your situation and how you answer those questions. Question number 3. What is one mistake people often make when planning their move to Italy? Okay, there's the biggest, I don't know if I should say one mistake or the biggest mistake. So I think that the one mistake that people make, I don't think it's that they underestimate the bureaucracy. Everybody, we're pounding that into people's brains all the time. You hear it everywhere. I think it's challenging. I don't think most people really appreciate how challenging the small things are, but I don't know if that's a mistake. I think one of the biggest mistakes, or one major mistake that most people make, is not taking the time to prepare themselves and their financial selves for the move to Italy. So not preparing for the currency exchange, not in advance speaking to a currency person. Maybe if your rates are really good now, not buying a future or reserving that rate for future. This can save, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars when you're doing that exchange. Not preparing for where you want to live based on your income and your taxable status. Not taking time to speak to an Italian commercialista, which is like a CPA in Italy, to really understand what your financial taxable position will be, to help you understand what is the best way to come here and where's the best place to live. Now, it's not that taxes are restrictive, that this will prevent you from moving. So, don't avoid doing it because you're afraid your dream will, go up in a puff of smoke. It's not the case. It is about planning and being prepared and understanding that you do have options, that there are some really great tax incentives here in Italy for new arrivals, but understanding what they are and taking the time to plan in advance, because then once you're here, that stress or that unexpected financial shift doesn't feel so bad because you're prepared for it. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you of something. You don't need all of the answers right now. You just need the right questions and the space to think clearly. If this episode helped you feel more grounded or less alone, that's exactly why the show exists. You can find all of the links and the resources that I mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. And if you want to go deeper, head over to smartmoveitaly.com for more ways that we can help you make your move to Italy a whole lot easier. And if you're enjoying the show, subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with someone that is also dreaming about Italy helps more than you know. Thanks again for spending time with me. I will see you next week. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
This episode is brought to you by the Smart Move Italy app, your free tool for planning, moving, and thriving in Italy. Download it today on iOS and Android. Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Dietary Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Dietary Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.